Welcome back, everybody, to the second half hour of News Talk for this Wednesday. I'm Bruce DePoit. It's great to have you there this time. Coming up for you later this half hour, why the Nationals hired Dusty Baker rather than the man they really wanted. Right now, though, let's get back to our analysis of this week's balloting in Virginia and our conversation with the University of Mary Washington political science professor Stephen Farnsworth and reporter Michael Pope of WAMU 88.5. Before the break, Michael, we were talking about the ads and the chatter, the fear talk right before the election in Virginia about this notion that we would see folks allowed to use I-66 in an individual, as someone driving in a car by themselves, which they're not allowed to do now, but you'd have to pay $17. So forgetting the good, they were seizing on the bad, and there was all this talk of $17 tolls. I thought it was potentially political gold, especially coming right at the end. Before the break, Professor Farnsworth said he didn't think it had much impact. Do you agree?
Well, if you look at there were 5 candidates that were targeted, and 4 out of the 5 of them won. Only one of them didn't win, and so you have to say it probably wasn't all that successful as an attack. People hate taxes, they hate tolls, though. So, I mean, it certainly had the resonance of something that could have worked, but if you look at the actual results, we don't see that it really had much of an impact.
Alison Silverberg came out of the 3-way primary for mayor of Alexandria, the winner. That put her on a glide path to victory. The incumbent, William Ewell, decided he would run as a write-in, even though he had fallen short. He was one of the 3 candidates running in that primary. Decided he would take a second whack at it with the field sort of narrowed, but with the obvious hurdle and challenge of not having his name on the ballot, having to go through this frequently unsuccessful write-in bit. Silverberg barely broke a sweat. She won going away. She'll be the new mayor. She
won handily. It was 63% for Alison Silverberg and only 37% for the write-in vote. We still don't really even know who those write-in votes were for. So Silverberg is the mayor-elect. You know, this election is so fascinating, endlessly fascinating in Alexandria. This was the ultimate parlor game, with people sort of having theories and all kinds of potential scenarios. And, you know, now this was kind of ended up being kind of a nasty campaign, with lots of charges and countercharges. And so I would imagine now that Silverberg is going to be the mayor, there are going to be lots of hurt feelings and grudges that are going to linger for many years to come. In many ways, actually reminds me of the 1985 race for mayor in Alexandria, when there was a young up-and-coming guy by the name of Jim Moran that ran as an independent, knocking off the incumbent Democrat at that time, Chuck Beatley, and people today, 30 years later, are still holding grudges about what happened in 1985.
And from a public policy perspective, the issue of development and what's the right amount for a compressed, compact, historic area like Alexandria, very much at the forefront.
Well, absolutely. I mean, sometimes in largely one-party environments, the biggest fights are going to be intramural. And so the idea of whether you are a pro-development Democrat or an anti-development Democrat is really sort of motivating a lot of the politics of Alexandria. And that was part of the primary. And the pro-development wing of the Democratic Party in Alexandria really basically split its vote among 2 candidates, a current mayor and a former mayor, and that gave an opportunity for the more anti-development candidate of the 3 in the primary to be the nominee. Write-ins are always a tough environment, especially when you think about how Virginia law is set up. We have an explicit sore loser prohibition so that you can't run as an independent after having lost a party primary. You have to have the signatures in for an independent run before that primary day. So the only real option that was available to the current mayor, who's now going to be an ex-mayor very shortly, was the write-in option. But no doubt about it, there were a lot of people in Alexandria who wanted to see him win. There was a lot of money put into this campaign in behalf of this write-in candidate, and so you can anticipate a pretty combative environment in Alexandria going forward. I think that rich communities, poor communities, historic communities, development is one of those long-term issues in Virginia that even affluent communities are really struggling with.
For backers and foes of the development plans that have been discussed for quite some time in Alexandria, particularly in Old Town, what does the election of Alison Silverberg mean?
Well, it means that the developers are not going to have the same playing field that they've had for a long time, which is why the developers were so interested in supporting Ewell. If you look at the campaign finance records, the developers gave Ewell about $25,000, more than $25,000, after he announced his bid to be a write-in candidate. There's one particular developer that cut a $10,000 check. So Silverberg on the campaign trail has been quite critical of development on the waterfront, but also on the West End. And so I think that's really where we're going to see the next battle, on the West End of the city of Alexandria, where developer JBG, who was one of Yule's chief contributors to his write-in campaign, where JBG is going to be engaged in a huge development that's going to displace many thousands of low-income people. I think that's really the next battle.
The development that's already occurred is eye-popping. I don't opine on it beyond that, but just as a longtime resident of the region who drives through the area occasionally, it's like there's something new every time you go. Again, good or bad, that's for others to decide. It's just interesting that things have proceeded the way they have.
Yeah, and it speaks, I think, once again to the really sort of wild, wild west environment of campaign finance in Virginia, because there really aren't any real limits to what you can do as long as you disclose it. And so you end up with huge amounts of money being put into some of these races, like the Alexandria mayor's race. But even with all the House of Delegate races and the Senate races that were pretty much decided as soon as the nominee from one party or the other was determined, there was a huge amount of money spent, because no doubt about it, businesses think it's in their interest to invest in politicians. And if they don't get their money's worth, they won't continue to donate. So it's pretty clear they've been getting their money's worth.
Your ear can't help but perk up when you use the word invest in this context, but I get the point, no question. Can you talk in about 45 seconds, that's all I have, about the Fairfax, any big takeaways from the balloting for the Fairfax board?
Yeah, the big takeaway was the Sully district, where you had a retiring Republican and the Democrat in that race won. So you're going to have one more Democrat in the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors than you did before. The thing I'm actually focused on, I asked the candidates about their position on the citizen oversight board for the police department. I found it interesting that several of the incumbents did not commit to supporting that. John Faust, Jeff McCabe, Penny Gross, and Pat Harity are still on the fence about whether they're going to support that.
Despite all the controversies we've seen.
Despite all the controversy, yeah.
Michael Pope covers Virginia politics and Northern Virginia politics in particular for our friends at WAMU 88.5. Good to have you here. And, of course, author and Professor Stephen Farnsworth of the University of Mary Washington. Our gratitude to both of you for coming in on this day after a big election in the Commonwealth. Thanks very much for your time, as always. When we return, the Skins prepare for the Patriots, and the Nationals select Dusty Baker. Our man Tom Threlkeld joins us after this.